So yes, please.
So the first thing is it depends on the school as to what support systems exist. So not all schools have a dedicated SL teacher. So some schools may not have anyone who's kind of focusing on those students. So if they do have an SL teacher, that's the first thing as a classroom teacher to do, is to connect with them, make sure they're aware of the student. Then they should assess them to work out what their English language ability is and be able to give you feedback about the kind of support you can give them in your subject area. So that's the first thing, is actually working out what level of English they have. Now, sometimes we have students who come who have no English ability at all, but they are very academic. So they've been educated to a very high level in their home countries. And what usually happens there is it becomes very quickly apparent through the translation that they do of their own ideas. So they may write in their home language, and then the translation reveals that they have a really good understanding of ideas. It's just the language that's the barrier. So in that situation, then they may stay in the SL classroom working on a sort of SL specific lesson subject with me, and we'll look at sort of tasks they're doing in other classes and then try and build up their vocabulary that way. And usually those students who have a strong academic background will pick up English quite quickly, because they're able to make those links between their home language and the English language and the concepts and ideas, because they have that understanding in their home tongue. If we have a student who comes to us who has no English and no real education in their home country, this is where we start seeing problems, because there's two problems. There's the language barrier, but then there's also the understanding barrier. So for the students like that, it's working with, so as a classroom teacher from that perspective, working with the SL teacher to either say, actually it would be better for this student purely to work on their English for the first year that they're here, depending on what year level they're going into, and then bringing them into mainstream classes when their vocabulary is developed and their language skills have developed a bit. And also so that they can build understanding of concepts and ideas. And usually for students like that, they will stay in an SL class the whole way through their schooling as well. So they'll have that on their timetable the whole way through. So yeah, there's different approaches depending on the ability level of the student, obviously. I usually recommend to classroom teachers that if they know how to create vocabulary lists for their subject of key terms and words and phrases that they can give to the student prior to a unit of work, so that they've at least got that before they start reading texts or listening to information. Not always do they have time to do that. So again, if there is an SL teacher in the school, I can do that on behalf of those teachers. Or if there's a teaching assistant like we have here, who's allocated to students to work in classes with them, they can work on those vocabulary lists with them and keep going back to that vocabulary list, building it with them. And that can really improve their understanding of a subject just through the word choices as well. As a classroom teacher as well, I think activities like using images alongside text is really helpful for students who don't speak English as their first language, because that's just going to aid their sort of understanding of what is going on. If you're asking a class to answer questions about something they've read already or seen or watched, it might be that for the SL student it's doing a close activity, so they have the information with gaps in it and they have to just put the right word in the gaps, and that's showing their understanding rather than getting them to write out lengthy sentences and answers. I think it's also about moderating teachers' expectations of these students, because sometimes they will verbally pick up English really quickly because they're immersed in the language and they're listening and speaking it with their peers, and they may be able to have a really good chat to their mate sitting next to them, but actually they haven't yet developed any of the academic vocabulary they need to respond well in the subjects they're studying, or the understanding of the subjects themselves to be able to do well in them. And then teachers will say, but they speak English so well and they're always chatting to their friends, but they're still not doing any of the work. And when I remind them that they've only been here for 6 months or a year, and they didn't speak any English when they came, it's amazing that they've done so well in gaining that language skill in verbal, which is totally normal, but the reading and writing is going to take a lot longer. So it's about not removing the support, forgetting about them too quickly just because they sound like they're competent. And I do hear that a lot from other staff members, and I think this is something to be aware of as a classroom teacher as well. It's just because a student sounds competent verbally, and they're nodding away to you and listen when they're listening, doesn't mean they're understanding what you actually mean.
Yeah.
So the really important thing is you continue to think, okay, I need to assess their understanding here, like you do with every student. And if they're continually not getting it right, is it actually because they just don't understand still? Because they haven't developed that academic understanding yet in that subject area, or that vocabulary they need, or that writing skill that they need, that knowledge of sentence structures. So yeah, I think the other really important thing is, and this is something I've been working on with our internationals and our NESB kids, is that they don't experience too much failure in that first year of being at a school, because it's so overwhelming being surrounded by all this newness. They've just emigrated to a new country. It's really, they're already, they don't have their friends, they're trying to build relationships, they're trying to learn a new language. They're experiencing failure every day in all the sort of social aspects of their lives as well. So if you, as a classroom teacher, can give them that little feeling of success, oh, you managed to do that task, that's fantastic, you got that right, you understood this, well done, you're getting there, and really recognising, okay, they may not have got everything right, but if they've got something, and really celebrating success, I think that builds confidence, because if they just get it wrong all the time, then they're going to lose confidence. I think that's...
Yeah. you gave me, if you complete my research.
Yes?
Yeah,
Good.
everything is done.
Good.
Everything is done. I will start working on this.